one of the first things you did as secretary, I think, tell me if I'm misstating it, is commission a kind of study of autism. Can you tell us what that is? What are you seeking to do with that?
Yeah, I mean, the studies, there are a handful of studies that CDC has generated on autism. They were all epidemiological studies. And they all say what the CDC wanted them to say is they couldn't find a link. The problem is that the Institute of Medicine, which is part of the National Academy of Sciences, had said in 2001 that the link between autism and vaccine is biologically plausible. And they were highly critical of the way that CDC was making decisions about the vaccine schedule, that it was, this group ACIP, which is an external panel, which has the responsibility of deciding which new vaccines will be added to the schedule, that they had essentially been captured by industry. The people who serve on that panel, almost all of them have financial entanglements with the industry. And the Institute of Medicine recommended a retinue of studies, including animal models, observational studies, bench studies, and epidemiological studies. They said, you need this whole retinue to answer this question. The CDC never did those. Instead, it commissioned the creation of these 6 epidemiological studies, and none of them does what all of them were. They use fraudulent techniques. They say statistics don't lie, but statisticians do. And epidemiological studies are very easy to manipulate. None of those studies did what you would do if you wanted to find the answer, which is to compare outcomes in a fully vaccinated group to health outcomes in an unvaccinated group. And CDC did that study in 1999. They brought in a team of scientists under a Belgian researcher named Thomas Verstraeten, and they looked at the data. They looked at children who had received the hepatitis vaccine within the first 30 days of life, and compared those children to children who had received the vaccine later or not at all. And they found an 1,135% elevated risk of autism among the vaccinated children. And it shocked them. They kept the study secret, and then they manipulated it through 5 different iterations to try to bury the link. And, we know how they did it. They got rid of all the older children, essentially, and just had younger children who were too young to be diagnosed. And they stratified the data, and they did a lot of other tricks. And all of those studies were the subject of that kind of trickery. And so what we're going to do now, and meanwhile, the external literature is showing, over 100 studies that show that indicate that there is a link. But what we're going to do now is we're going to do all the kind of studies that the Institute of Medicine originally recommended. And we're going to do observational studies, retrospective studies, and epidemiological studies. We're going to do real science. And the way that we're going to do that is we're going to make the databases public for the first time. We've gone into CDC. We've gotten the data from CMS, which is Medicaid and Medicare. We're getting the data from the Vaccine Safety Data Link, which is the biggest repository for HMO health records. So those records would have all the records of vaccination and then the subsequent health claims. And you can do a cluster analysis and see if there's an association. And we're going to do some in-house studies ourselves, but more importantly, we're going to make this data available for independent scientists so everybody can look at it. And then we have already put out grant requests to the general scientific community so that any scientist with credentials can apply for a grant and tell us how they want to go about studying these. And we're going to get real studies done for the first time. And we should have some answers by September, some initial indicator answers. And then it'll take over the next 6 months, all these large studies by independent scientists all over the world. We anticipate there'll probably be about 15 different major teams who are all trying to answer this question. And within 6 months, we'll have definitive answers after September.
And is it your expectation that those answers will differ from the kind of status quo understanding?
I think they will.
So you get home from work on a Friday night, you're psyched because you've finished the entire week of work. It's time to reward yourself. So you go to the snack cabinet, and 10 minutes later, you've consumed an entire bag of chips, your typical American chip brand, and you feel like garbage. Of course you do. You just stuffed hundreds of calories of chemically laced, seed oil infused crap into your mouth. This is not a good way to start the weekend. And who hasn't done it? Cast the first stone. But there is a better way. It's called MAHA chips. And we have mountains of them in our house. Actually, we have so many, they're in our garage. We bring them in every day and hit them hard. And they're great. And you can feel good about eating them. They're delicious. And unlike the rest of this country's corrupted food supply, MAHA chips have no seed oils whatsoever. In fact, they have almost nothing in them except a few basic ingredients. Check the label, and you feel the difference. So they're not bad for you, and they are delicious. They're the total package. They're beloved by thousands and endorsed by nutrition experts around the country. MAHA is the way to go, MASA. Visit masachips.com/Tucker. Use the code Tucker for 25% off your first order. masachips.com/Tucker, code Tucker. You're going to love them.
My opinion, I always tell people, is irrelevant. People, we need to stop trusting the experts, right? We were told at the beginning of COVID, don't look at any data yourself, don't do any investigation yourself, just trust the experts. And trusting the experts is not a feature of science. It's not a feature of democracy. It's a feature of religion, and it's a feature of totalitarianism. In democracies, we have the obligation, and it's one of the burdens of citizenship, to do our own research and make our own determinations about things. Mothers, when they go shopping, they don't trust the advertising. A good mother does not trust the advertising. They don't trust what they hear. They do their own research, and it's a much harder way to live. But, that is one of the burdens of living in a democracy, is that we do our own research, we make up our own minds, and that's the way it should be done. And we're going to give people gold standard science. We're going to publish our protocols in advance. We're going to tell people what we're doing, and then we're going to use data, and we're going to publish the peer reviews, which is never published by CDC studies. We're going to publish anytime that we can the raw data, and then we're going to allow, and then we're going to require replication of every study, which never happens in NIH now. That's something new that we're bringing in, is that every study will be replicated.
I thought that was like a basic precept of science. We can't know something unless the experiment showing it can be replicated, right?
Yeah, that is a basic precept of science, and unfortunately, it has the kind of science that was done by NIH. And NIH was the gold standard agency when I was a kid. But they stopped doing that, and it incentivized a lot of cheating. And the reason it incentivizes cheating is that if you're a scientist, your career depends on how much you publish. And so if you have a hypothesis and you say, this is my hypothesis, this is the study that I want to do, and you get a grant from NIH, and the hypothesis turns out to be wrong, the science does not support it. A lot of times you cannot get that study published. That's science. It's science when a null hypothesis is science, and it ought to be published, but the journals won't do it. And also the journals won't publish anything that is critical of vaccines. They won't do it because there's so much pressure on them. They're funded by the pharmaceutical companies, and they'll lose advertising. They'll lose revenue from reprints if they don't do that. So even Marcia Engel, who was the long time, I think 25 years at the New England Journal of Medicine, she said, you can't believe anything that's in the scientific journals anymore. Richard Horton, who's the longtime editor of The Lancet, is the same thing. He says, we've become propaganda vessels for the pharmaceutical companies. And the pharmaceutical company, now you have to pay to get something published in these journals.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. We hope you'll subscribe to it. And by the way, you can hit the little bell on there and get notifications every time we produce a video. We hope you'll do that also.